Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Oh, what an amazing guest we have on the phone. So grateful to have her. World-famous writer, speaker, and nutritionist, author of many amazing books, including The Fat Flush Plan and her newest book on the market, Radical Metabolism, a powerful new plan to blast fat and reignite your energy in just 21 days. Dr. Ann Louise Gittleman is on the line. How you doing, Dr. Gittleman?
I am very fine, and thank you so much for your lovely introduction, Jordan.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do the show. You really don't need to be doing this sort of thing, and I appreciate it, and my listeners appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, you were on this fat plan a long time ago. You've been involved in the world of weight loss for some 30 plus years. Coffee is really coming up a lot in the world of weight loss. Can you maybe explain, in your estimation, to my audience, this developing relationship between coffee, caffeine, antioxidants, and weight loss? Just this whole storm of coffee metabolism and weight loss here.
Well, there's a dramatic interaction between caffeine, the antioxidants in coffee, and weight loss. And it really surprised me, among other surprises that I've been reading about lately, because I have never been a coffee drinker myself. But I have to tell you that the recent science has busted through many myths and highlighted the wonderful health benefits of weight loss, particularly with coffee. And from what I'm able to gather from all the research and what I've noted with so many of my clients is that chlorogenic acid is the magic weight loss weapon in coffee. And so many people have not heard about chlorogenic acid, or CGA as we commonly call it. But it is really the element that makes coffee so good for your waistline, because it helps your body burn fat for fuel, which is what we ideally want. It suppresses appetite, it improves your lipid profile, and it also balances blood sugar. So that means it's very heart healthy as well as good for your waistline. So I'm a believer in coffee. I think coffee is here to stay, and the right coffee, the pesticide-free coffee, is really very, very important in this whole equation, because you don't want to be drinking a cup of pesticides while you're losing weight.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I speak to some of these doctors, they say that literally can be the difference between coffee being good for you or bad for you. If you're drinking the worst low-quality stuff and it is covered in pesticide, that could be a net negative for your health. But if you're drinking the not over-roasted, the not doused in pesticide, organic stuff, this can be a huge, huge boon. But as far as CGAs, have they been on your radar for a while, and then kind of coffee is now just kind of entering that scope field of view?
They haven't been on my radar until I started researching coffee, and
wow.
had to figure out. I used to think it was the caffeine in the coffee that was good for weight loss, but no, I was proved wrong again and again. It's the chlorogenic acid, which of course is the primary source of antioxidants in coffee. And to be honest with you, what I learned is that roasted coffee beans have a higher antioxidant content than raw. So if you're going to get your CGA in your coffee, you want it with a higher roast, at least a medium to high roast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a roasting curve that Purity dials in for each of its individual growers, but I think as long as you have a medium roast coffee, that's generally your best bet. But again, it's just about not having those contaminants in there. But you tell me. Let's talk about obesity. Let's talk about sugar, because like I said, I'm talking to Dr. Stephen Hellshine. He's saying, listen, if you're going to Starbucks and you're getting the pumps of syrup and the ice cream scoops, that's not coffee. You're really doing yourself a disservice here. Talk to me about the sugar in coffee. What can we use? What should we be avoiding? It's artificial sweeteners. Just give me the lowdown.
Well, the lowdown is that your body recognizes artificial sweeteners as sugar, and it can impact insulin, and I think that's been proven again and again. So when you're drinking your coffee, you want it sugar-free as much as possible, or even a little bit of honey or some maple syrup. Any of the natural sweeteners, I'm all in favor of at least 1 teaspoon in 8 ounces of coffee. But you have to make sure that those coffee beans are not contaminated with pesticides or other chemicals, and are also mold-free, which is something that we haven't discussed. Many of us recognize that caffeine or most coffee is very high in pesticides these days, but what we don't recognize is that coffee is one of those hidden sources of mold, which is a primary issue in the integrative functional medicine community. So you've got to get pure purity coffee that is mold free, that is a medium to darker roast, and that you've got to make sure that whatever you're putting in there is not adding insult to injury. So we do not want any of the sugar alcohols in your coffee. If you do anything, a little bit of honey, maybe a little bit of butter or a little bit of MCT oil or even coconut oil would be just fine to help stabilize blood sugar levels.
Mm-hmm. But no, there is no artificial sweetener out there on the market that you approve of. It just doesn't exist in nature. No free lunches in nature?
No, it doesn't exist in nature and can create some real digestive problems. So we don't want anything that is of a sugar alcohol nature. I really am going back to the good old-fashioned unpasteurized honey or a little bit of high-grade maple syrup.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I know honey has some great medicinal benefits itself, so I like that. I like that advice. You tell me, when you see your patients and their relationship with coffee, especially the real coffee lovers, I kind of feel like maybe there's an added element of weight loss benefit, which isn't coffee sort of like their little respite, their little mental respite, their little treat? You can't have the bagel, you can't have the donut, you can't have the cinnamon roll, but you can still have that little cup of coffee, maybe a little bit of cinnamon in it, or like you said, some butter.
Or cardamom. You've got to put a little cardamom in your coffee these days. Yeah, no, it's a very nurturing, it's a very comforting food, and I love it when we make a coffee drink in the morning. You know, in the book that I just wrote, Radical Metabolism, we use purity coffee as the basis of our morning drink every morning, which is kind of like a coffee smoothie.
Oh, that's
so
great.
I think you can take it alone, take it with a little extra protein powder, maybe some whey protein powder, a little bit of MCT oil or coconut oil, and if you're going to use any kind of sweetener, and if you wanted to avoid the high antioxidant honey or even the maple syrup, you could use a little cinnamon, a little bit of cardamom, or even a little bit of clove. So there's so many ways of using your coffee. And you have to understand that you're talking to a gal, and I'm going to have to repeat this. In almost all my other books, I've told people to avoid coffee until now. So I am now jumping on the bandwagon with a caffeine-free variety of purity coffee, and I've become a believer.
I love it. I absolutely love that. And to be honest, that means that you're intellectually honest, because when doctors and nutritionists and healers can't change their mind on a subject when given new information, I mean, what isn't that the root of the word doctor, is to teach? You know what I mean?
Well, we've got to be teachers, we've got to be influencers, and we've got to be realistic, transparent, and have integrity with all this. And when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And, you know, I just didn't read the good news about coffee until a book came out about 10 years ago, when I began realizing that coffee had so much good, positive research behind it. I mean, men who consumed up to 6 cups of coffee enjoyed a 60% lower risk of prostate cancer. I mean, that was big news in Science Daily.
Right.
And how your risk of brain cancer can be reduced by about 40%, and how it reduces the risk for breast cancer. And that's another concern I have. You know, it's not just weight loss and not just slashing the risk of diabetes, but also the specter of cancer, which is looming with 1 in 2 of us in this day and time.
Wow, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, let's talk about anxiety. Let's talk about the jitters, because, you know, as someone who's a big fan of healthy, high-fat diets, I mean, you've been on that train now for 30 years, and you see it now working on a lot of people who couldn't really get through the weight loss barrier and are now pushing through with things like keto and paleo. But a lot of people are throwing butter in their coffee. In your experience, does that help with the caffeine? Does that help with the anxiety, the jitters, that sort of thing?
You know, what I've seen, and I haven't seen this clinically, but what I've seen is it can help kind of blunt the effect of the caffeine. But if you're sensitive to caffeine, as so many of us are, just genetically, we're predisposed to not being able to really process the caffeine, you can get a caffeine variety of coffee in the Purity brand, and that is just as high in the chlorogenic acid. So for heaven's sakes, your weight loss benefits are not going to be negated.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Wow, so really all about the CGAs. And for those who can't drink coffee or maybe can't stand the taste, you still have advice for them too when it comes to the antioxidants, right?
I would say that they can use at least half a cup of coffee and maybe blend it with maybe a tea if they'd like, maybe a little bit of dandelion root tea, or a little bit of peppermint tea, a little bit of something that we call Bengal spice tea, which is very aromatic. And I think you can take just a little bit of this goes a long way. But the chlorogenic acid aspect is so very important that I'd hate to have anybody miss out on it.
Oh, I like that. Wow. Incorporating it however we can. Well, Dr. Gittleman, tell us what else you're excited about with coffee and the work you're doing and any upcoming works that you're currently working on.
Well, I'm following all the positive coffee studies. I'm looking at all the meta-analysis that I can view in terms of coffee drinkers and their rates of less cancer and so forth. And I'm also interested, believe it or not, in all the other uses of coffee. There are coffee enemas that I think can be very helpful in the prevention of certain types of cancer.
Yeah, a lot of talk around that right now.
I love it, and I'm hopeful that Purity is going to make a special coffee enema coffee that people can use because it's a very popular treatment for the gallbladder, for the bile, and for the liver itself for detoxification. So that'd be number one. And there are also these coffee, I think they call them coffee retention enemas that women use vaginally, which can be very helpful. So I'm very interested in all the various ways that we can insert coffee from the tip of your head to the bottom of your feet, and any place in between.
Well, enlighten us a little bit there, talking about, I know the bile duct in the liver is a big benefactor of the coffee enemas. Can you share any of the science or theories that you have surrounding coffee enemas and health?
I'm not certain about all the hardcore science. I know that coffee enemas were a primary staple of the nutritional programs that were used by a very avant-garde, leading-edge cancer researcher, Nicholas Gonzalez, who recently passed away. And he was a big believer in the use of coffee enemas, 1 to 2 a day with some of the cancer sufferers, and he used it preventively as well because it helps to detoxify the bile. And so when you do this, you're detoxifying a very important aspect of the flushing of the bodily toxins. And women that have issues with hormone imbalance, hormone havoc, have found that the use of coffee enemas is very helpful in moderating the menopausal, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal hormonal I'd say fluctuations and challenges that they have. So this is a very important use of coffee. I think that coffee has so many important benefits. We've only just tapped the surface, so to speak, skimmed the surface.
Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. Dr. Gittleman, do you have any parting words for my audience?
Well, I'd say that the studies that I have seen show how coffee offers major protection against oral and skin cancer issues, as well as breast, endometrial, prostate, colon, liver, lung, and brain cancer. That is a pretty big claim to fame. It contains anti-inflammatory compounds, and it has one of the highest antioxidant levels of all foods. So that in and of itself should make this a staple in everyone's diet.
Awesome. And for my listeners, can you share a website for people who want to learn more?
Yes, let's go to radicalmetabolism.com.
Radicalmetabolism.com. Everybody, check that out. Thank you so much for listening. This is Jordan River and Dr. Ann Louise Gittleman signing off, saying thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.